When the world outside feels like it's falling apart, there is nowhere that I would rather be than in my cottage garden in the spring. Spring just always feels so hopeful, so full of possibilities and potential. And when my plants start to pop out of the ground in the spring, it seems just like I'm seeing old friends all over again. And this spring, it seems especially poignant to be here in my cottage garden, which is filled with perennial vegetables just waiting to feed us, and my medicinal herbs just ready to treat my family and friends, even from things that are deemed untreatable. And it's all sitting right there when the headlines are announcing possible food and medicine shortages. It's just a good place to be. And it's a good thing that I want to spend time out here, because in the spring, there is a lot to be done. Most of the plants in the cottage garden are perennials, and they come back year after year on their own. So now that the cottage garden is in its second year, the only new plants that I have to seed or transplant are the few annual herbs that won't self-sow, and a few annual veggies that I like to have close at hand, and any new plants that I'm adding to my collection. When we started this garden last year, it was just a lawn. It was very nice and healthy sod. So it's not any surprise that a little bit of grass still tries to grow in the middle of the herb beds. But I really want to let my herbs get established, all those perennials get nice, good root structures before the grass can take them over and start fighting with them for space. So the biggest job of this spring out here in the cottage garden is to weed out the grass. Most of it is the kind with those really long runner roots that are stretching in from outside the garden where we didn't kill off the sod. And it's kind of oddly therapeutic to pull the long roots out of the soil that is really workable right now. It actually just pulls right out plants and long roots and all of it in long strands. When it was said and done, even though it's kind of a big job, it actually only took a few hours to get through all of the beds. I'm not looking for perfection, and that's good, because I sure won't get it when there's grass involved. Every winter, I try to leave the flowering seed heads standing in the cottage garden so that the birds can eat the seeds. They especially love the clumps of sunflowers and echinacea that I leave for them. They get a good winter meal, and I get to watch them right outside the kitchen and the dining room windows, so it works out really well for everyone. But now the dead stalks need to be cleared out to make room for this year's growth. I also need to trim out the winter-killed stalks from my damask roses. They're just about to set new leaves. These are the best smelling roses ever, period. They are perfect for dried rose petals, for cosmetic use. I have a face wash that I just love making from them. But they only flower for a short time every year, so you have to be ready to harvest them when they're ready. And then there is the cafe table. I just love this little table. It doesn't look like a whole lot right now, but all of the hollyhocks and hops are just about to grow up right around it and tuck it right into a wall of flowers. It is an absolute perfect place for a quiet cup of herbal iced tea in the summer and to sit and just contemplate life, or a nice visit with a hot cup of coffee and a friend. One day maybe I'll actually lay down some pavers to make a real patio, but for the moment we're just content if we can kind of keep the spot a little flat. A really fun element of the cottage garden is my collection of perennial greens. These plants pop up in the spring before we can even plant the early spring seeds in the ground. Soon the plants will all grow really tall and green and just take over this space in the garden. There's going to be flowers on almost every single plant. The bees and the butterflies will buzz right through the whole thing, and the birds will be flitting through everywhere. But there's still one more chore to do before we can get on with the growing of the garden. This is the most important garden chore though, and it is often the hardest one. in my busy life to actually do. But as always is the case, it's usually the most rewarding. And it is the chore of just sitting in the garden and being still. For some reason, it's really hard to get myself to do this, especially in the spring. There's just so much work to get done on the homestead, and it feels like if I sit still for too long, something important is gonna get ahead of me and not get done. But just like magic, every time I take a few minutes to just sit and be quiet in the garden, I feel a bit renewed, a bit hopeful, and ready for the challenges for the rest of the day. It actually helps me to work better and more efficiently on those other projects when I take the break. If you don't have a cottage garden yet to sit and recharge in, there's still time to start one this year. Don't wait.